The Reserve Bank of India recently signaled an important shift in the way it regulates NBFCs or non-banking financial companies. What are non-banking financial companies? Non-banking financial companies are companies that lend to businesses and households in India, but which are not, as their name suggests, banks. So, the Reserve Bank of India's two proposals, one of which became effective this month, are an important shift because they do two things. First, they reduce the number of small, less risky NBFCs that the RBI will regulate. And second, they increase the intensity of supervision of the large, riskier NBFCs. By and large, this is a step in the right direction, but it stops short of confronting an important question that has been outstanding in this field for many years now, which is, why do we regulate small non-deposit taking NBFCs at all? Why is this an important question? This is an important question because NBFCs today sit at the center of India's credit architecture. A disproportionate share of riskier, small ticket, last mile lending, whether it is to MSMEs or households or informal businesses, is done by NBFCs more than commercial banks. NBFCs such as Muthoot Finance with its gold finance backed model, or Bajaj Finance with its consumer durable models, has demonstrated its ability to expand access to credit much more than banks have. And therefore, questions of how much to regulate directly affect their ability to scale. In my finance and governance column in the print this week, my co-author Harshvardhan and I argue that although the two measures that the RBI has suggested for deregulation of NBFCs are in the right direction, the actual scale of deregulation is modest, and we need to be asking much more first principles based questions on why do we regulate NBFCs to begin with. So how large is this deregulation really? The RBI's first proposal seeks to exempt NBFCs from registration if they meet three criteria. First, if they do not have any customer-facing activities. Second, if they do not raise public funds. And third, if their assets are less than 1,000 crore. Now, prima facie, this looks like a major step of deregulation. However, actually, the number of entities that will effectively get exempted because of this measure are relatively few. These are primarily corporate treasury arms, internal refinancing arms, what we call invisible NBFCs, simply because these are internal refinancing arms within large real estate conglomerates, or manufacturing conglomerates whose task is to move capital across subsidiaries and sister concerns, but they really don't have any external borrowers or lenders. Now, exempting them is sensible, and this was a step that was long overdue. A large number of small NBFCs, in fact, have customer-facing activities. Consider a small NBFC that finances the purchase of second-hand commercial vehicles or finances the purchase of tractors at a district level, or even a small NBFC that lends working capital loan to local businesses. These NBFCs are most likely to fall below the 1,000 crore asset threshold, but they will have intensive customer-facing activities with borrowers to do borrower evaluation, continuous credit monitoring, and even recovery. The question, therefore, is how large is this deregulation really? Now, since the number of NBFCs that have customer-facing activities is not listed anywhere, we ran estimates of these numbers from analyst reports and by speaking to industry practitioners, and we found that this exemption will effectively exempt not more than 1/3 of the NBFCs that exist today. More importantly, the entities that drop out are many in number, but do not really bear a large share of the risk in the system. So, in effect, RBI has, through its proposal, reduced the number of entities from regulation, but hasn't really changed the distribution of risk in the system. The RBI's second proposal, which was announced as part of its statement on developmental and regulatory policies, it's a statement that releases bi-monthly along with its monetary policy statement, moves in the opposite direction. It proposes to tighten the supervision of the larger, riskier NBFCs. Now, to understand this proposal, it is necessary to get a quick preview of how RBI regulates NBFCs. So the regulatory framework really classifies NBFCs into 4 layers: the base layer, middle layer, upper layer, and top layer. Where an NBFC falls in any of these layers really depends on its asset size and the risk embedded in its business model. NBFCs in the lower layers are regulated less strictly, supervised less intensively compared to NBFCs in the upper layers. The RBI's second proposal affects NBFCs in the upper layer of this pyramid. Now, the upper layer today has about 10 to 15 NBFCs that have been identified by the RBI on the basis of their asset size, interconnectedness with the rest of the financial system, complexity of the funding model, and other qualitative factors. In its proposal announced earlier this month, the RBI proposes to replace these qualitative factors for identification of the upper layer NBFCs with a clear, bright line threshold of asset size. So if an NBFC has assets of less than 1 lakh crore, of more than 1 lakh crore, the NBFC will be placed in the upper layer. Now, clearly, this proposal has 2 advantages. First, it enhances predictability of which NBFCs will be placed in the upper layer and reduces the discretion involved in this selection. And second, it aligns risk with asset size, which is generally a reasonable proxy, but not really a complete proxy for systemic risk. Now, while the move towards a rule-based threshold for identifying NBFCs to be placed in the upper layer is predictability enhancing, there are some limitations. First, that said, specifying a bright line test of asset size of 1 lakh crore for classification of NBFCs in the upper layer raises some concerns. In an economy that is growing at 6% per year in real terms and significantly faster in nominal terms, balance sheets will expand rapidly. It is entirely possible that many NBFCs will over time have assets exceeding 1 lakh crore, not because they are systemically risky, but because the economy itself has grown. Now, this creates 2 problems. First, this may mean that the upper layer is mechanically expanded, thereby diluting its purpose as a layer of significant regulatory intensity. Second, a static threshold of 1 lakh crore ignores other factors of risk, such as dominance in a particular lending segment, say housing finance, sounds familiar, or interconnectedness or complexity of the funding profile, all of which may matter more for systemic risk than sheer asset size. So the question is not about how do we make NBFC identification easier. It is about how do we make identification more predictable and place it within an accountability framework without losing its essence of systemic riskiness. At present, the upper layer has about 15 NBFCs that have been identified by the RBI. Based on balance sheet data, we estimate that the number of NBFCs in the country with asset size exceeding 1 lakh crore rupees is in the range of 12 to 20. This means that the proposal announced earlier this month will only modestly increase the number of NBFCs in the upper layer. In short, the 2 proposals read together will only modestly reduce the number of NBFCs that are exempted from registration and regulation, and will only modestly increase the NBFCs that will be subject to a more intense supervision. Taken together, the 2 proposals point towards a broader rethinking of NBFC regulation within the RBI, but stop short of fully embracing it. If regulatory capacity is limited, and it is, then the objective cannot be to supervise thousands of small entities with equal intensity. Today, nearly 95% of the NBFCs sit in the base layer, with systemic risks being concentrated in a few hundred, and if we look at it more narrowly, in a few dozen entities. The proposals only modestly reduce the number of entities in the base layer and only modestly increase the number of entities in the upper layer. A first principle-based, coherent approach towards regulation of NBFCs warrants more radical thinking. First, India must consider deregulating all NBFCs below a defined threshold based not just on asset size, but also on their interconnectedness with the rest of the financial system and the complexity of their funding profile. In effect, this would mean that a large number of small NBFCs would be out of the regulatory and supervisory purview altogether, and that's fine. Second, the regulatory focus should be on the systemically relevant entities, the identification of which must be based on scale, as the RBI has rightly done, but also account for their interconnectedness with the rest of the financial system. But what about consumer protection? A common objection to any deregulatory proposal in India is that the deregulation will leave the consumers without any remedies. But RBI's comparative advantage lies not in policing conduct across thousands of geographically dispersed small lenders, but in enforcing prudential supervision. Prudential supervision is, in fact, a blunt tool for enforcing consumer rights. A more effective approach to protect consumers would be to strengthen consumer protection through ex post consumer redress mechanisms, such as the Consumer Protection Financial Board that one finds in the United States, or the Financial Redress Agency that was recommended by the Financial Sector Legislative Reforms Commission in 2013. Consumer enforcement, these kind of forums are better suited to address questions of mis-selling, unfair contract terms, and coercive recovery practices, as opposed to sheer blunt tools of prudential regulation and supervision, which are not designed directly for consumer protection. The RBI's proposal to regulate NBFCs over the last 5 years have been largely in the right direction. The latest proposals also move the regulatory approach towards a more coherent regulatory framework. That said, incrementalism has its limits, and in a system where risk is concentrated in a handful of non-banking financial entities, the case for regulating thousands of small entities that do not raise any funds from the public is even weaker. Financial firms lie on a spectrum of small and local to large and systemically important. The challenge for us in India is not how do we regulate each of them with equal intensity, but how do we regulate fewer but regulate better? Thank you.